what gets valued are fields that provide innovation for global capitalism. So what becomes the most important fields are things like applied sciences. So for example, for a long, long time, at places like MIT and Caltech, there was a clear hierarchy. The smartest people that did physics or math sometimes. The dumbest people in natural science did biology. Okay? True for a long, long time. And you can actually measure this in this instance by test scores, for example. SAT scores, GRE scores. I mean, I don't know what they mean, but certainly there was a hierarchy. And certainly everyone believed this. About 10 years ago, it shifted. The smartest people want to do biology. Why? Do they suddenly want to save people's lives? Did they become suddenly humanitarian? No. All the money is in biology, genomics, things of that sort. Bioengineering, biotech. Right? It's not in physics. There's no money in physics. If you look at stars, it's very interesting, but there's no money. If you find the fundamental structure of the universe, it's very important and interesting, but there's no money. So what do people want to do? Well, they want to do things that make money. And the hierarchy is very clear then. In engineering, for example, for a long, long time, again, there's a simple hierarchy. Electrical engineering was the most important. At Berkeley, about 5 years ago, there was a revolution because a new field, biological engineering, emerged. And now, whether you look at number of applicants or the average test scores, it's easily the highest. Why is that? This is where you can make all the money you want in the world, whether you create prosthetic, artificial arm, artificial organs, whatever. The idea of research changes. So for von Humboldt, and everyone followed for a long time, and Einstein is kind of an iconic figure, the most important research was fundamental theory. You try to figure out the fundamental structure of something. It could be the atom, could be a computer cell, could be the universe, could be social theory. So social theory used to be very, very prestigious. When I did it. The world has changed. No one cares. Because research is translational, meaning it's applied. So I think I talked about this very briefly, but the reason you wanted to do these basic things was supposed to be uphill, upstream, as opposed to downstream. And people used to look down on people who do downstream research because they didn't have the profound mind to engage in pure theory. Applied people were not very smart, but maybe if you really work hard, you can make contributions. Now, the really smart people supposedly want to do these applied research because that's where all the money is. And so the truth actually is now increasingly limited, made possible, but also constrained by money. That's what's driving it. It's not curiosity. Professor Wu was telling me, or actually that's not Professor Wu. So I have a colleague at Berkeley Sociology named Michael Buraboy, who's currently the president of the International Sociological Association. And his big idea that he's trying to spread is this idea of public sociology. That sociologists should great knowledge of the public. Anyway. If you go to China, he said, so he goes on this lecture tours in China, and in every Chinese university, the question is, will this get me an important publication in top sociology? Right. So he's lecturing about how it's important to, do public sociology to improve the world, include China, whatever. What all the students want to know is, will this help me get my journal and go in? It's not quite the same thing, but increasingly, the truth is what will get you into the journals and what will bring you money. it's not all bad. Increasingly, global university is cosmopolitan. If you go to any top universities around the world, you will hear 40 different languages if you go through campus for 20 minutes. They come from all English, of course, the lingua franca. That's very cosmopolitan, like the old Latin university. And finally, the ideal professor is no longer the monk, no longer the one who stays in his study or her study and generates great thoughts, but someone who has business on the side. So if you go to Stanford, what's really interesting is it's very hard to say where is the university and where is the business. All the great companies that Stanford generated, like Google, it's so intertwined with the institution. It's very hard to say where one begins and where the other ends. Okay. So why does this happen? Well, it happens for a number of different reasons, as I mentioned. The state wants this because it wants to be nationally competitive in a globalizing world. Forgetting that the more they invest actually in their higher ed, very often they're simply fueling the might of US and to a lesser extent UK and other universities. There seems to be a global competition in which everyone involved wants to engage in the same kind of competition. The faculty members, students, alumni, they're all united in trying to make whatever institutions you're at one of the great universities in the world. So it's partially pride and prestige and partially fashion. And as I mentioned, there are consultants who will teach you how to create this kind of global university. Each individual struggles and engages with these international associations that tell you that you have to act in a certain way. And of course, the most important is that there's this not so silent actually compulsion to publish or perish. The other big push, I think, is not just research, but the globalization of credentials. By which I mean that credentials used to be a purely national phenomenon. I mean, that is to say, if you live in Taiwan, or actually it's not as true, but if you went to National Taiwan University, it's very prestigious. So it's great. You didn't want anything much higher. You couldn't get here. I mean, University of Tokyo is the best example I can think of, because in part because of my experience being there. So when I was there in a long time ago, 1985, what was interesting was I didn't think it was such a great university, but everyone else outside it. When they found out I was at Tolai, I would actually have people getting on the ground, begging to have their kids getting to Tolai. It was very prestigious. Anyway, but increasingly, the people who want to hire at top institutions don't care about national institutions anymore, because the labor market has become globalized, and many of these top corporations, they want to hire the best, and they want to hire the best from universities that they have heard about, that have some reputation. And so there's kind of this global dissemination of desirable degrees. So increasingly, they also emulate the US. So in the US, you get these degrees called JD, which is lawyers. And many countries are trying to emulate that because it's a degree that, because of the US, is translatable to other places. So the global universities become become part and parcel of the same global regime of credential building. Okay, so is that all just going one way? Well, the answer is no, of course, because there's always the weight of tradition, right? I mean, sometimes it's a bad constraint, meaning that, very often universities are poor, so they can afford to play this game of global competition. Sometimes they are very, very conservative and traditional people who don't want to change. And occasionally there are people who are convinced that for a particular place, that it's not good to emulate the global university. There's no particular point in trying to compete with Stanford or MIT. But the problem is this. Like in social theory, actually people don't have any alternative ideas. So even at truly great universities like University of Cambridge and University of Oxford in the UK, they are actually trying very hard to be American. Why? Well, because they realize that their top professors very often move to the US. And they don't know how to retain them in this competition without becoming more like America. And certainly no one has any pronouncement about what the university should do, like Newman. Today, there are many books written on higher education, but faced with this idea of the global universities, we don't actually have any idea. So if you talk to your president, it doesn't really matter if you talk to NTU, or National University of Singapore, or University of Tokyo, or Seoul National University, or Beida, or Tsinghua, it doesn't really matter. And if you ask them, what vision do you have? Well, they would have basically the same answer. They want to be more like Stanford, MIT, Harvard, maybe Berkeley. Nothing else. They have no vision. And this is certainly true for Ministry of Education bureaucrats across not just East Asia, but the world. How do I know this? Well, I talked to them. And they all, it's really striking. They don't have any idea. So, in summary then, what I'm arguing is that the global university in many ways has become hegemonic. Hegemonic in the sense that it's seen as obvious, it's natural, and necessary. And there is no one who wants something different, and no one who suggests anything different. So if I then again ask, what is an excellent or elite university going to look like in this age? The only thing people can say is that it's going to look like Stanford or Harvard, like a global university. And students, people like you, are actually no different. You just know about the global hierarchy of prestige. I mean, it's really amazing. I think not so long ago, even 30 years ago, you could travel around the world. And, there were a lot of people who didn't ever heard of any of the leading American universities. Washington, you wrong. I mean, they may have heard of Harvard, but certainly not Stanford. Today, you have to go very, very, very far to very, very, very poor places. And it's very hard still to find people who don't know what these places are. So what's wrong with this? Well, it's just like social theory. The only thing that's left in the absence of a good idea is that you have this non-thinking bureaucratic or technocratic criteria. Just publish more in SSCI. Not to create knowledge that might emancipate people, empower people, might be really illuminating, provide meaning, whatever. There are no linguistic ideals about what it should be. So no one seriously still talks about how the university is a place to cultivate oneself, to become a better person, to become a democratic citizen, whatever. It's a place for you to get credentials, get skills, make more money, make your parents happy. I'm not that against making your parents happy. It's like mainland China is a very different place from Taiwan, as you all obviously know. But one of the reasons you know you're in a different place is, so I did something like what I'm doing here at Fudan Industrial, in Shanghai. I mean, it's not quite like Michael Verwey, but it's very similar, you know? I mean, so students, these undergraduates will come and say, well, I'm thinking of going to graduate school. I say, oh, very good. What are you going to study? And so students will say, well, that's what I want to talk to you about. I said, oh, good. You mean what are you interested in? Well, if you're interested in social theory, say, maybe you can do it in sociology. It's possible to do it in political science. Maybe you can go to some philosophy department. No, that's not what they're interested in. The typical question is, will I get more money if I go to graduate school in finance or chemical engineering? Which one should I go? It's like, do I major in sociology or political science? Which will have a higher income? I don't know. It's irrelevant. But anyway, so this is what I mean by a world in which it's the ranking. And money becomes the main measure. Do you want to study at Berkeley or Stanford? Who's ranked higher? Why should that matter? Which is ranked higher? Because it's a sociology department. And it's not a generic sociology department. If you're interested in study of X, maybe Stanford is better. But if you're interested in the study of Y, maybe Berkeley would be better. Or if you're interested in study of Z, maybe UCLA would be better. Who knows? But no, the ranking says, the university ranking, maybe sometimes departmental ranking. So what we have is, instead of von Humboldt's character cultivation, this idea of building, become a better person, or this idea of calling, that you are really driven to want to learn something, to discover truths about certain areas of the world, or perhaps even to change the world. It doesn't really matter. Just something that you want to do, you care about. We just have a series of professionals who want to pursue their utility, which is measured in money in a very soulless system. So it's not surprising that everywhere around the world you see the convergence between university governance and business management. Because universities run increasingly like a corporation. Make more money. Why do we want innovation? No, we have to make money. Why do we have to make money? So we can do research. So it's this kind of circular process. So returning to knowledge creation then, what does this mean? Well, once the university becomes the dominant institution for creating knowledge, right, having monopolized it almost, it becomes kind of ensconced in this globalized system. And so what happens is that the kind of knowledge that's valued is actually knowledge produced at the center and usually carried by these globalized elites. So what happens, and in some ways this is no different from what happened 50 years ago perhaps, but the promising students are sent abroad, get their degree, and bring back the latest knowledge from a leading university in the West. This is, of course, one of the reasons the structure of inequality and asymmetry continues. You're always going to be behind because you're not trying to do something different from them. You're doing the same thing just 5 years later. And, of course, at the same time, because you play the same game as the rest of the world, what counts is not what I call the knowledge of the present, knowledge that matters, whether locally or regionally or even internationally, but a very artificial kind of knowledge, especially in the social sciences, which very often has nothing to do with anything. So in political science, for example, game theory is very popular, rational choice theory. And this will say almost nothing, for example, about anything. But eager political scientists, not just in Taiwan, but South Korea, China, mainland China, and even Japan, come back, disseminate this theory, and think that they've really advanced science. And teach them to their students who have absolutely no substantive knowledge about the politics of their own country, history, institutions, names of politicians. Let me give you one simple example. There's a, I believe this is a video game. I think I'm very courageous, but I actually hate getting sued. And the thing about British people is they love to do these character defamation suits. It's very easy in the UK to win character defamation suits. So I'm not going to name his name. I would love to name his name. But at a very, very, very famous university in UK, which can only be one of two, there's a guy who I met in Korea 3 years ago, to be exact, who says he's a real expert in Korea. I said, really? He says, I've been to Korea 20 times. Okay. Well, I said, oh, do you speak Korean? No. Anyway, so we're eating lunch at this place. So he's been in Korea 20 times. And there's no clear reason you would know this unless you go to Korea. But probably the most iconic dish in Korea actually isn't barbecue, Korean barbecue, because Koreans actually don't eat Korean barbecue very much. But this thing called naengmyeon, which is just cold noodles. They're just noodles, broth. So this noodle comes up in the course dinner. So when he looks at this person who is super expert, look at this noodle that everyone knows about. He says, what is this? So I said, it's naengmyeon. Never heard of it. What is it? I said, it's noodles. No problem. He says, I don't want to eat it. Anyway, there's not much point to this anecdote, except to say that because he's a professor at a famous university who claims expertise in Korea, because he's been to Korea 20 times, he can't even say hello in Korean. He gets to be at the center who judges articles on Korea and regulates knowledge about production of knowledge about Korea in the world. So all the people in South Korea, for example, who know a lot about history, a lot about culture, a lot about politics, social movement, people, NGOs, whatever, as long as they write in Korean, they can get a job, ever, in the university. And their knowledge is not part of, in many ways, legitimate knowledge, because the university increasingly dominates this sphere. They're just activists who are writing opinionated things. But this is the world that is increasingly being shaped, right? In countries in which this globalized university becomes the norm. And I'm suggesting that this is increasingly the case in East Asia. So getting back to the point I wanted to make, insofar as kind of the social theory is kind of reinventing the kind of knowledge that would be important for democratic reconstruction of locality or the nation or the region, the kind of social sciences that are being produced in global universities actually are not very useful. And not surprisingly so. Because it's the form that counts, not the substance. And though one likes to believe that form, kind of this form of deductivism I keep on talking about, can do the job, it just cannot. Or after all, how do you really rethink, say, Taiwanese politics, just to use one simple global example? You can tell who the main prime minister is, what the legislature looks like, what its history is, what your conception of being Taiwan or China might be, realizing something about the exceedingly strong regional diversity or even ethnic diversity, linguistic diversity, when the only thing you know is perhaps first year even and maybe some data that you found in data collected by development. But that's the world in which we live. And sad, I think, is a society like South Korea when you completely lose that and give in to this globalized university. So you win in one sense. So national universities are ranked higher than national government because it's playing the game. But the cost, I'm suggesting, is truly great. So anyway, let's take a 10-minute break. And then you have to ask me questions.
那我再宣传一下好了，那个明天 Professor Lee 的公开演讲，他要讲的题目是日韩的流行音乐嘛，然后他要讲那个 AKB48，所以听起来非常的炫。那欢迎大家明天中午12点半，如果有兴趣的话，12点半来。R401听演讲，这样子。那我们今天3样子，那个有没有油脂的？帮忙大概水上。谢谢谢谢。
我们等一下3个要不要去问他说120要不要？直接问那个你先晒完后，可以啊，你先晒。哦，是啊。等下上课的时候。OK， 没问题啊，没问题。这也是约星期四，没有，3个23分吗？
我们有发海报哦，可是我不知道品权做出来没有。
5点左右吧。
不是我很抢空，希望明天中午会送出来。我会1点钟半前就发海报，就是可能很赶。对，我给他压力。
其实这我没有1点这样好。我要说是约是5点，然后再是3楼的。好像是。
跟他们俩上，我们这个没事情不好。I see. The first American, I see. That's actually. Oh, right. Wow.
我这样好录吗？那我要把它按下，按哪一个键？按暂停。
Yeah.